Hello and welcome to Policy Square, a series of discussions and dialogues with policymakers hosted by Primus Partners and Business World. In this edition, we are honored to have Mr. S. Niranjan Reddy. Mr. Reddy is a Member of Parliament in the Rajya Sabha since 2022, representing the state of Andhra Pradesh. He is also a practicing lawyer in the Supreme Court of India and the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. So, welcome to Policy Square and thank you so much for being here. So, in this discussion today will revolve around the data privacy landscape in India with special focus on the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. So, just to set the context of the discussion, want your views on the current data privacy landscape in India, and it is evolving quickly. There is also growing realization amongst policymakers regarding the need for robust laws around protecting our citizens' personal information, given that we're in this digital era. So, in your view, sir, what are your views on the data privacy laws in India, and to what extent does the DPDP Act address these concerns?
As you said, Srishti, I think we are still evolving. This is a new area, so we have not had too much of law around protection of privacy. So, I think in terms of the iterations we have had, there was a bill that was circulated, there was a joint parliamentary committee report that came. But in my assessment, when I look at this bill, I look at it as the government taking the initial baby steps. They are testing the waters, so to say. So, they don't want to come in and make a very elaborate law, which they may have to later whittle down, which I think is a good calibrated approach. Having said that, yes, there is a necessity of protecting privacy, but then it needs to be done in an organic manner, where it should not stifle the businesses or create some kind of an apprehension around the businesses working, while at the same time ensuring that maximum protection is afforded to individuals' data.
Yes, definitely. I think it is a very well-intentioned act, piece of legislation, and it is a step in the positive direction. I would also like to delve into the implementation of the act, because I think the success of the law hinges partly on the consumers being aware of their rights and actually pursuing them through grievance redressal mechanisms. But interestingly, the Act does not require or obligate the Data Protection Board or any authority to actually educate the citizens. So, in your view, does this raise any concern around how effectively the Act will be enforced?
See, in some sense, while I think that there needs to be a greater level of education, I personally think that it is well considered that the Data Protection Board is not tasked with this responsibility. One, it may not have the means. Two, it may not have the infrastructure or the bandwidth, because it has been entrusted and tasked with certain responsibilities. I would be happier if the Data Protection Board were to focus on those responsibilities. But there is a clear need for the people to be aware of what their rights are, and someone needs to be that vehicle of giving that information to the general public. Quite like when we see Reserve Bank of India notifications that are issued, I think this is where possibly the government may have to take a lead. So, it may have to come up with public awareness programs, it may have to enlist the support of some well-known persons and celebrities for informing the people of what their rights are. Now, once the rights are informed, they also need to be told that there is a method of enforcing those rights. So, the informative campaign, I would rather be happy if that is taken care of by the central government or the Information and Broadcasting Ministry or any other authority that may be entrusted with that job. Data Protection Board can then focus on the jobs that it has under the Act. It can work towards ensuring that the data protection regulations are strictly implemented, because otherwise they may start chasing the wrong pursuit and get too stretched where they may not be able to properly work what they are entrusted under the Act.
Yes, definitely. So there is need for educating the citizens,
Absolutely.
but it needs to be a more collaborative effort.
Correct. And maybe the government may have to take the lead.
Yes.
It may have to move forward and come up with something where it will inform the people of their rights.
Yes. So you also mentioned, the role of large major tech players, and we've spoken about the role of the government, but I think it's also important to address the role of major tech players, the private sector. And there's no denying that they have a significant influence in the way the future of the technology is shaped. So in your view, sir, how can these big tech players leverage or use this influence responsibly to propel innovation? And also, second, how can the government collaborate with the private sector, with these large tech players to promote healthy innovation also, but also promote technologies that benefit the society as a whole?
See, from the tech platforms side, it will be a matter of them volunteering to do something in terms of something like a corporate social responsibility for promoting the larger general good. So that is something that will be difficult. I mean, while you may be hopeful and you may want them to do something, but I think government should not be in a place of such hope. What the government cannot say that, okay, we hope they do something. That is what we as citizens can do. I think the government then needs to be a little bit of slightly more proactive in understanding its power and role. While I am not advertising or promoting that government needs to regulate them more, there are a few concepts that are well known in law. Like for instance, when we used to have these cricket matches being telecast, there was this theory that once a broadcaster got absolute rights in respect of telecast, then no other person would be able to share an image or even on the news show any clipping. I think that's when the matters went to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said no, there are some things which are known as public goods. Like today, if the tech platforms are using a large amount of data relating to now what the Act calls as data principles. These are scores of data principles who are actually who constitute public. So maybe down the line, and the jurisprudence would still have to evolve, data relating to a large section of public may actually be treated as public goods. Like today, when you look at any elements of nature, you look at water, beaches, mountains, minerals, these are all now accepted to be part of public goods which the government will be able to regulate for the purpose of general public benefit. So if all these tech platforms are feeding on this data and their size, which is not proprietary to them, if you strictly see, what is proprietary to them is their company and their capital, but they are feeding off this goods and data of various other people. So at some point of time, I expect the governments around the world to rally around to a position which will say that, look, you have the advantage of these public goods, so we will hold you accountable to certain public responsibilities. So they may have to come up with some device with some new schemes. Under the Companies Act in India, we try to do what is called as a minimum percentage of money must be spent for corporate social responsibility. I mean, they choose what they want to spend on, but when they spend, they have to account and say that a particular percentage, 2 or 3% of their annual profits are spent for certain corporate social responsibilities. I think a few amongst, apart from just making them contribute towards some innovation for public good, or like we have the digital public infrastructure, they could have some features like that. But I think what is more interesting is, to me, I am waiting for the day when the governments will be able to make some of these regulations mandatory, something like interoperability. You would not be able to say that I will not allow, I will use my platform in an insulated manner. So some of these laws, if they are made, especially in a country like India or most countries for that matter, I think they would be able to pass muster, because they are meant for larger public interest. They only regulate these large tech platforms, so that those regulations can goad them, and they can also be incentivized. I mean, I think the governments will have to come up with a stick and carrot policy.
Yes, yes. And so you did touch upon certain emerging technologies, ensuring interoperability. And I think it is important to also discuss another piece of important legislation, which is the proposed Digital India Act. And it is set to, because the DIA is set to regulate existing as well as emerging technologies. And when we talk about emerging technologies, we talk about AI, IoT, Web3 technologies, including blockchain, and these hold a lot of promise as well. So how do you see the DIA actually approach this and address use of these technologies for the wider good, but also protecting your citizens' right and data privacy?
Too early to anticipate, but if one were to look at the DPDP Act, if this is symptomatic of the approach the government wants to take, then I think the DPDP Act seems to indicate that the government is leaning more on principle-based law and regulation. So maybe we will end up following what the EU did in terms of the harm and risk-based approach. But I think we may also borrow a little from what US is now contemplating to do. It does not want it to be as rigid as the EU law. So AI, IoT, blockchain, all of this are still I think works in progress. So we are not really sure how they would evolve more and manifest. But I think it will require a legislation which is quite like DPDP Act, which needs to be principle based in my assessment, needs to be minimal to start with, but this can't be a law for all ages. I think this is where the government will have to make a shift. Earlier when a law was made, you would have the same law that would not be changed. So while we have had iterations and fresh iterations till the DPDP law is made, I think even after a Digital India Act is made, and I am hoping it will be to start with minimal, but once the law is made, then depending on how the law is actually working in practicality, there may have to be a repeated revisitation of the right, just to see if we need to change some things. So it's going to be a long tinkering process, because the situation and the facts that the law will have to deal with are still not clear, and they are evolving. So the fix for the government is, it can't wait endlessly. It needs to come in with something, but it is not sure if it is coming in to deal with something that has completely evolved. So this is going to be the new legislative challenge for the government. Many times what they also do is they leave a little bit of freedom within the law, saying that government can issue a notification or issue certain directions. So all of that, this will really require, as I said on the floor of the parliament, it will require a nimble and agile government that is going to respond on a real-time basis.
Yes, sir. And I think the point that you mentioned about taking a principle-based approach rather than a prescriptive one will help adapt with the technologies that are evolving as we speak. So thank you so much for this insightful discussion. I'm sure our audience will also find this very useful. Once again, thank you, sir.
Thank you.